My name is Keith Mars. I was born June 27th, 1956. I was born at the City Hospital in Fayetteville.
And this interview is for the Farmington Oral History Project, and we just want to verify that we have your permission to shoot this interview.
Absolutely.
Who are your parents?
My dad was Frank Mars. My mother was Magnolia Hodges Mars. I was the baby of 8. My dad was 56 whenever I was born. My mom was 42.
Tell me about your family. Who are your siblings?
I've got 3 brothers, Jimmy, Mac, and Tommy. I have 4 sisters, Sue Sanders, Betty Farr, Ann Dorman, and Peggy Osborne.
Okay. Tell me about your family's business.
My dad was a cattle buyer for several packer buyers up north, and basically made his living off of farming and raising cattle. We had a small farm out off Weddington Road out west of Fayetteville. Grew everything we ate, killed everything we ate. I mean, it was a tough, simple life.
What was your part in the family business?
I would come along so late that Dad's health was so bad. It was rough. I mean, I had to do a lot of the stuff that he normally would have done, but the kids were so much older by the time I came along that I was absolutely a mistake, obviously, and so I basically got to do what he couldn't do or didn't feel like doing.
What are some examples of chores you would do there on the farm?
We had cattle, we had chickens, had a humongous garden, plowed the garden with a horse. We didn't own a gasoline motor, anything. Push mower for the yard, crosscut saw for wood. We heated with wood, didn't have running water. We just had electricity. Drew our well from water from a well. It was pretty basic, pretty basic life.
What other jobs did you work when you were a young man growing up?
My first job I had really was working for my brother Mac. I was running a sod cutter, and I was probably 8 years old, 9 years old. Then worked in his construction business, running a backhoe and a dozer. I could drive a backhoe and dozer before I could drive a car. And we did all the sewer lines in Farmington Heights there behind the football stadium. And anything that came along, hauled hay, went to work for Dr. Hall, had a big farm out west of town here, and took care of his farm whenever I was going to high school, so I could be able to play sports and still have some freedom to do. He had probably 125 to 150 mama cows and probably 300 acres out there on the river. That was pretty much the jobs I had until I graduated or my senior year, and then I went to work for IGA part-time right after my senior year in high school.
Tell me about your earliest memories of Farmington.
Probably my earliest memories of Farmington would be how simple it was, how laid back a life it was. Not a huge town. It was like a Mayberry. Everybody knew everybody. It was a small town atmosphere, small town, good people, good solid people, good, honest, morally, ethically good people. It was always a tight-knit community. The community always supported the school programs, in athletics and academics. Anything that came up that needed volunteers, there was always people there to do it.
What stores and businesses do you remember as a young man coming into Farmington?
My first memories of Farmington on stores would have been, there was McNeil's store that was just down the road from where the school is at now. You had White's grocery store. It was just a little small store that I own today. Then we had a Collins and Davis store, the Cardinal Cafe that Henry Buchanan owned. There wasn't a lot of businesses there. It was pretty barren. We was a 2-lane road. There wasn't a lot of population, and back then our population was probably 600 to 800. I remember it went over 1,000 was a big deal. It was a big milestone for us.
What was it like attending school in Farmington?
Fantastic. Well, attending school in Farmington was probably, I don't want to say is a dream that it came true, but I was so fortunate to be able to be raised in Farmington and go and have the teachers that I had, to make the grades that I made, to be able to play the sports that I got to play. I've been a lot of places all over this country, and I've never seen any place that I would even consider close to being home like Farmington is. I've been here all my life. I'll be buried here.
Tell me about some of your classmates that you remember from grade school and older years.
The classmates that I had in school, a lot of them, we started first grade and we graduated together. I mean, Ronnie Hudson was a great friend of mine, and we, met the first day of school and was extremely close all the way through school. Bobby Hudson, his brother, Ricky and Randall Lewis, Wesley Stevens, Bill Cooper, Tim Thomas, Mike Kilpatrick. I mean, there's just a lot of people, Karen Lewis. There was a lot of people that, we started in the first grade and we finished all the way through, went all the way through school. And a lot of them are still around here today.
Who were some of the teachers and administrators that you remember?
Most of the teachers, that I had great teachers. Miss McChristian was my first grade teacher. Had taught school for umpteen years. Her daughter, actually, I had her in my 8th or 9th grade year. Tanya McChristian, that taught school here for 40 years. Mrs. Blue, Miss Davis, as I told you before, your mother or your grandmother was a tremendous influence in my life. She was a super, super person. And we exchanged Christmas cards till the day she passed away.
What about some of the principals and superintendents you remember?
The superintendents that we had that stand out was George Ledbetter. He was the one that was the superintendent whenever I was in high school. Very, very thrifty-minded superintendent, to say the least. We would go on ball games, and he would have the lunch ladies to check, fix us a sandwich. So we kind of joked we'd have a hot, we'd have a cold sandwich and hot milk. That would be we couldn't afford to eat going there, so we didn't stop at a restaurant and eat. Whenever we were going to playoff games, they packed our lunch and we eat a lunch on the bus going down.
Let's talk about sports. You played on the team with Coach Holland and the championship teams.
Yep.
Let's talk about those. What do you remember about those years?
The championship teams were, were a special time in life. So very fortunate to have been part of it. It just all came together. We're just a bunch of raw-boned redneck kids that came together, and we was extremely close. We went to school with each other forever, and we started out in junior high. I never played ball till in the 9th grade. I didn't have any way to go to practice, and I had a neighbor, Mike Rich, that he would come by and pick me up and take us to practice. So in junior high, we lost our first 4 or 5 games, and we just getting pounded. Holland was so upset he wouldn't practice with us. He said, "You're the sorriest bunch of losers. I'm not wasting my time on losers. You guys go out there and have a good time. You're going to get killed whenever you play." True story. And we'd go out and play and grab around. And I'll never forget, we went to Pea Ridge and we beat Pea Ridge 2-0. And we thought, wow, hey, this is, we're yelling out the window and shaking our fist at them. We're pretty cocky, thinking we're good. And Holland came out the next day and he said, "All right," he said, you got a taste of winning. You know what it's like. And we won our last 4 or 5 games that year. And then my sophomore year, we didn't, no one really expected a whole lot, and we started really well, but then we lost the last 3 out of the 4 games, I think, and Holland is just livid. Hates losing at anything. I'd hate to play him in dominoes. Checkers, whatever you played on him, he's going to win. And so he'd made his mind up between my sophomore and junior year. He worked us extremely hard, and we hauled hay through the days, have morning practice, haul hay, do evening practice, get up, go back and finish our hay hauling. So my junior year, we started out, we went to Prairie Grove, and we we had Prairie Grove beat on their field, and Prairie Grove was good. And there was a huge malfunction of the clock in the last minute that basically they didn't run the clock. Was a huge ordeal, and Prairie Grove beat us on the last play of the game, and was tremendous, outpouring of people that was really upset. And so, Holland come back and he was determined that was it. We're not going to lose again. He said, that's it. And so, we started out and we never lost another game, my junior and senior year. I mean, we went back, Prairie Grove came to Farmington the next year, and I believe we beat them 54-8, on our field.
How big a deal was that Prairie Grove game?
The Prairie Grove game was always huge because all the kids knew each other. And I've got a lot of good friends in Prairie Grove. I lived in Prairie Grove my senior year. My mom and dad had to sell their place. Dad's health was so bad he couldn't take care of it. So I lived in Prairie Grove my senior year and went to school at Farmington. I had to go to the school board and they had to grant me a district transfer for $1. And so I took a lot of heat from the guys in Prairie Grove. They'd egg my house and toilet paper my house and, and soap my car and in good fun, nothing mean at all. I'd do the same thing to them. But it was a big rivalry. It always was. Probably one of our biggest games of the year was always for Prairie Grove. I mean, it was a hotly contested game every year.
Talk about the playoff game. First year, junior year, the first year you won it.
The playoff games, my first year when I was a junior, we didn't have any idea what to expect. And we went down, and I believe I'm right, I think we played Danville, which was the defending state champions from a year ago. And, excuse me, nobody gave us much of a chance. And I believe we beat them 20-0. And, back then they only took the conference champions and the runner-up. You didn't have half the conference going. So if you were a conference champion, you got to bye your first week. So we got to bye the first week and drew Danville the next game, and we beat them 20-0. And then we made it to the championship game and, and won that fairly easily. And because I think, we slept up on a lot of people. And then the next year, my senior year, there was everybody was laying on us. Everybody wanted a piece of us, and because we throttled them pretty hard our junior year. Well, they wanted revenge, and Holland's rule was we couldn't score more than 50 points. 50 points was it. If you run it up, and I don't want more than 50 points scored, and I don't want points scored against us. So my senior year, I think we averaged like 48 points a game, and we gave up like 2.7 points a game. We had 7 or 8 shutouts in a row. He was just a super disciplinarian. I mean, and honestly, if we hadn't had Coach Holland, we're probably a 500 ball team. I mean, really and truly, I believe that, because without him, we wouldn't have done anywhere near what we did. I mean, I really believe that to this day. And, the kids he had, he wanted 25 hard-nosed players. He didn't want lollipops or tootsies, as he called them, that, wasn't in shape and wasn't ready to play. And he was just he was ahead of his time in coaching when he came to Farmington. So it was very fortunate for me.
Coach Holland talked about the fact that he hadn't practiced during preseason, and I guess that was very controversial at the time. The practices that Coach Holland had, we had an extremely rough off-season regiment that running and lifting weights. He didn't even want, if you played football, he didn't want you playing basketball. There was a couple of the guys that would play basketball, but not very many. He wanted you focused 100% on what you were doing. And he wasn't bashful about letting you know it either. And, he was extremely disciplinarian. He would go out at the end of Little Elm Road and Rays Mill Road and take a clipboard and make us run out there, and he would check us off and run back, and then he would, make sure that we made it about there and made it back. And, we did that. I think we would run Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we lifted weights on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And, it was a rough time, but none of the kids had air conditioning. I mean, we were in fantastic shape. I mean, we were great shape, all of us. And it was just like the perfect storm that just came together good. The only undefeated team Farmington has ever had. Talk about the Greenland rivalry.
The Greenland rivalry, Coach Holland, there was a coach at Greenland named David Kossover, and he spurred Holland all the time. So he sent Holland some Greenland colored tube socks, tube socks and football socks that had the green and yellow stripes on them, and told Holland that he might want to wear these so he'd have the winning colors whenever we played. So the only game I ever remember Holland telling us that we could score as many points as we wanted. He said he played first string the whole game. And my sophomore year, we beat him, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, it's 22-0. My junior year, we beat him 44-0. And my senior year, we beat him 66-0. And if we could have scored 100, we would have. That was the only game he ever turned us loose on that said you can score all you want to score. And we knew we'd better score big. But it was a pretty hotly contested but friendly, if that makes any sense. I mean, it was a spur between the schools. And you got to remember that whenever we were doing this, there wasn't the Shilohs and the dominant of the Fayetteville 7A teams that there was back then. We were really the first team in Northwest Arkansas that was really dominant. I mean, we wanted to play Fayetteville bad. We wanted to scrimmage Fayetteville, and they wouldn't do it. We tried. Holland tried to scrimmage us just to see what we could do. And that was unheard of back then, And in my senior athletic banquet, Coach Broyles came and spoke at our athletic banquet, which was unheard of. I don't think that ever happened again, but that was after we'd won state championship for the second time, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal in the town. The whole town basically shut down whenever we played. I mean, they followed us wherever we went. We would have a humongous following. I mean, we would have more on the visitor side than the home team would have on their side. So it was a big part of the community and a big part of the town.
One of the stories that Coach Holland told was, I guess it was during the off season, the kids wanted to play volleyball, and I guess Coach Lake, I don't know if you were in the room, but he got aggravated and said he threw the ball and told the kids they needed to decide if they wanted to play football, if they wanted to be like Greenland and do nothing during the off season. Do you remember that little?
Absolutely.
Tell me from your perspective.
Well, Holland he had a deal what he called the Tootsie Hunts in the off season. He didn't want anybody, again, he didn't want us playing any other sports. I mean, really, he wanted guys that was 100% committed to him. He had, the off-season conditioning that he had, and he called them Tootsie Hunts. He's looking for Tootsies. If you're a Tootsie, you wuss out and you walk off. And he took great pride in breaking kids and making them walk off. Not because he was mean to them, it's because he was looking for the best of the best. He wanted the toughest kids he could get to play. And I know between my junior and senior year, there was a lot of kids came out that wanted to play that next year. But we won state championship. This was a big deal. And so the first day of practice, Holland walks out there and he gives his patented speech of, you guys think you want to play. Well, I got news for you. You're not going to play. We're going to work you so hard, I'm going to run off the wannabes. He says, I want the ones that are going to stay. And he worked our tails off for 2 or 3 days. And you got kids every day, several kids dropping out, throwing up that couldn't do it. I mean, he's running us, he's working us. No water. We got a 6 or 8 ounce water break once a day, and he's giving us salt pills because we're cramping so bad. We didn't know we were dehydrated, and he's feeding us those yellow sulfur salt pills. And that's a true story. He wanted 25 to 28 good, hard-nosed kids. He didn't want 40 or 50 kids on the sideline dressed out. I mean, he was adamant about that, very adamant. And the community supported it because everybody loves a winner. As long as you're winning, you can do about whatever you want to do. But, when you start getting mediocre and you're losing, that's when you get all the Monday morning quarterbacks coming in.
Any other stories from Coach Holland you can think of?
Coach Holland was always a guy that was tough and put up a big front, had a big heart. He wouldn't show it very often, but he cared. He cared about each one of us like we was his own kids. It's hard to explain. He's the kind of guy that you would bleed for. If and if he loved you, he loved you. And if he hated you, he didn't want to have nothing to do with you. And his kids that played for him was his family. I mean, he there was nothing he wouldn't have done for us. And but also Holland was the one that would give licks in school at noon. It's a true story. On the 7th grade, my first class, I didn't play football 7th grade. Holland's first day of school, first class, first bell, he walks in the study hall and I'm standing up. And he said, I'll see you at the courtyard at noon. I go, cool, we're going to have lunch or something. I did not have a clue what was coming. So noon, I'm at the courtyard, and here comes Coach Holland and Coach Barr. He was the basketball coach. Holland's probably 6'8", and Barr's probably 6'4". Holland comes out with this looked like 3-foot long walnut paddle with holes drilled in it, double handle with a leather strap on it. And he calls my name. And I go out there, and he said, grab your ankles. And he hit me so hard, I let go of my ankles and raised up. And he said, if you raise up, we're starting over. He said, I'm going to give you 3 licks. I said, well, I wish you'd told me the rules of this game before we started, but, I grabbed my ankles, and he hit me 4 licks. He bruised my kidneys, he hit so hard. I can still hear that paddle going, whew, pow, as it hit. So, I'm wanting to cry, and I can't cry because everybody's around, and they're just in shock. They're just going, golly. And he had 3 or 4 that he whipped. But the next day, whenever he came into class, every one of us was sitting in our desk with our hands on our desk looking forward whenever that second bell rang. He didn't hardly say a word in study hall. He didn't have to. We knew what was expected of us. Ronnie Hudson had gotten into trouble and was going to get licks. Well, Ronnie had went to the gym and put on 6 or 7 pairs of gym shorts. And Holland calls him out there and gives him licks. And Ronnie made the bad statement to somebody that it didn't hurt like he thought it would hurt. That got back to Holland. And Holland found out that he had 6 or 7 pairs of gym shorts on. So we were having, I think it was an off-season practice or something, and he calls Ronnie to center court and kind of walks out of his office. He's got that paddle. Ronnie's just got on gym shorts. That's all he's got on. I said, Ronnie, grab your ankles. And, well, what I do, Coach? He goes, I heard you said that, it didn't hurt. We're going to try it again. And old Ronnie, he gave him 3 licks, and it was brutal. It was brutal. You'd probably be arrested for that today, but you didn't have to worry about it. You didn't get in trouble. The other thing he did that was really unique is if any kids got in trouble, any of his players got in trouble in school, we'd form a bull ring, and he'd put boxing gloves on us at center court, and we'd box till somebody drew blood. True story. And you drew blood. When you drew blood, it was over. That was the end of the contest right there. He was the one that if you were in a class and you got in trouble, he was the one that would come in. And we had a class one time at Miss McChristian, and we give her fits, and Holland walked in the door one day, and he looked at her, and he said, who's the ringleader? And she looks at me and points her finger at me. And I said, oh, Lord, here we go. And, I think it was my junior year, we're playing ball, and he walks over there to my desk, reaches down and grabs my paper on my desk and wads it up, throws it in the corner. He says, get on your hands and knees and push that around the room with your nose. Devastating, and I did it and didn't have no choice. And he said, when you get that done, he said, I want you to stand with your nose in the corner till every person leaves this room. And he said, I had better not ever come back in here. And he never had to. That was it for me. And those are all true stories.
When you were a kid in Farmington area growing up, what were some of the things that you and your friends would do for fun?
The fun things we did growing up was simple. There wasn't the things that the kids have now. We would rock wasp nest on Sunday afternoon by going down by the creek, and we'd rock wasp nest to just knock them out of the trees. And, fished. We fished a lot on the rivers, hunted a lot. There wasn't a lot of the sideline activities. There wasn't summer sports. There wasn't traveling sports teams. Our entertainment, honestly, a lot of us, it was work. We were working. There's a lot of kids that had farms, that worked on the farm. We hauled hay. There wasn't a lot of I know the first movie I ever seen was the Ten Commandments that our Bible school teacher took us to see, and I was just dumbfounded. That was up on the old Ozark Theater, and I'd never been to a movie theater before, and just couldn't believe that something like that even existed. You know, I'm probably 12, 13 years old before we seen that. So there wasn't a lot of, you had to make your activities, you had to make your pastimes, but because if you sat around and whined about not having anything to do, you know, my dad would find me something to do that I guarantee you I didn't like doing near as good as some of the other things I wanted to be doing.
What did your parents and other adults do when you were a kid? What did they do for fun?
My parents, for fun, there wasn't any fun. We never went on a vacation. True story, I never eat a meal at a restaurant with my mom and dad. My mom and dad never seen me play a game in sports. It was a different time. It was, it was church on Sunday morning, church on Sunday night, church on Wednesday night. Any community activities, we were always involved in, potluck dinners or anything like that. But, there was no family vacations to go to, some faraway place and do. At least for me, there were some families that did that, but there wasn't any of that for us because we just didn't have the money to do it. I mean, it was just out of the realm of doing it.
What kind of things would you get together with neighbors to do? Simple, fun things that weren't maybe expensive.
I was raised in the Highland community, which is out west, and the Highland Community Church, and the neighborhood was extremely close. We would, there would be Saturday night get-togethers at the community building where they would gather, play wahoo, checkers, dominoes. The neighbors would get together and each of them would help them in their gardens, dig potatoes. And I hated digging potatoes, because we not only dug ours, we dug everybody else's because they would help us, we would help them. And again, it was a working community. A lot of people worked on the farms, but they worked in town also, and they worked on the farms on the weekends and, after hours. But, it wasn't a social event to be raised up. It was a working event to be raised up, and you worked to eat, and you worked to live. That's exactly what you did. You worked to try to provide so you had, the things you needed to get through life.
One of the big local organizations in Farmington was always the volunteer fire department. And were you ever involved in? They always had their annual breakfast. Did you ever come to any of those?
The volunteer fire department, I was never a member of the volunteer fire department. My work that I worked, I was working, 60 hours plus a week and building houses on what time I did have left. We always had the pancake breakfast, which I went to for umpteen years and, went to this year. That's a big social event for Farmington. That's one thing that has stayed constant, and the people that you talk to will tell you that Farmington's got one of the biggest turnouts for their Farmington Fire Department pancake breakfast of any place in the country, and it's quite an event. It's large. It's a packed house from early till late. So the Farmington community has always supported that.
Let's talk about when you got out of high school. What was your career path after that? I know you said you never really thought about going to college because you couldn't afford it. How did you end up where you are now?
I ended up working at IGA. A friend of mine, a guy that I went to school with, he had worked there his senior year just part-time. My dad had cut meat and actually knew Shug Curtis, which was one of the old original owners of IGA back years ago. And I had went and interviewed with him after, it was probably in November, after ball season was over, the first part of December. And of course, they hadn't opened up here. They just built Westgate Shopping Center up by the bypass. In fact, the bypass, they just finished the bypass. It wasn't even in place. And so I started to work there, and they had an opening in the meat department that was coming up. And so I graduated in May, and I had graduated Friday night. I was 17 years old. Moved out Saturday morning, put all my belongings in a Volkswagen, and one trip, and moved in a one-bedroom apartment for $90 a month, all utilities paid, and lied and told them I was 18, and I started cutting meat Monday morning. And done that for 30 years. Run a market for 15 years. Then I was a supervisor for 15. We was fortunate enough to buy in ownership on 7 stores, which was very good for us, and afforded me the opportunity to start my construction and development and rental business that I got in, and I took my money out of that and invested into the developments that we done. I've done several developments in Farmington. So it's been a slow progression, but we've seen a lot of changes happen out here. Our traffic count now is 30,000 plus in front of our office here where the old Arvest Bank used to be, at Farmers and Merchants Bank, originally built in 72. And, it probably back then, I bet the traffic count was probably 2,500. It was basically nothing. At 7 o'clock, you could roll up the highway because there was just nobody there. By starting the way I worked and I worked hard, I knew the only way I was going to have anything was to work hard. Didn't have the affordability of having, it was unheard of. I didn't even know about, grants or student loans. That just there wasn't a lot of kids and we had some fantastic athletes. There wasn't but 3 or 4 of them that went on to, make any kind of college career at all. And, it just wasn't one of them things. It wasn't like it is today, for sure.
Let's start with the 70s and kind of what it was like in Farmington, and tell me the businesses you can remember popping up over the years. I know there's been a lot of them.
The businesses that popped up in Farmington over the years, I remember whenever the 7-Eleven was built as a convenience store. That was a big deal for Farmington. That was probably in late 60s was the first thing that I remember coming in, other than the businesses that was already there, like the Collins and Davis Grocery and like the McNeil's and the White's Grocery. Stark Brothers Nursery was here. That was a big employer, kind of the hub of Farmington there for a while. And then it was kind of a slow process as growth came on. Farmington's not just boomed and exploded. We've seen more growth in probably the last 10 years than the probably previous 40 years. And we're 2 miles off 49. We're a 5-lane road. Got a fantastic school system, fantastic police department. It's just a great place for people to raise their families and to be close. We don't have a lot of industry, but over the years as the stores came in, the Cardinal corner, Terry Neal built that. And I'm not 100% sure, probably in the early 80s, something like that. That was a big deal whenever that came in. And then whenever Southwinds was developed in the late 80s, that was whenever the commercial strip there across the front. And I was the one that, pushed to get a Marvin store out here because I knew there was people out here, the volume was here. And it was a good store. We did really good volume until Walmart came in, and it just devastated them. And no, they can't compete, so they closed it down. But then the Sonic followed, and of course McDonald's, the new post office that came in. So growth spurs growth, and we've been a slow progression, but it seems like we're a snowball going downhill that's gaining a lot of speed. We're fast forward 20 years, and now you've got the Dairy Queens, the Taco Bells, dollar stores. You've got a lot of growth that is looking to Farmington. We have people all the time in the real estate business that would love to be in Farmington if we had the facilities. We just don't have the facilities for people to lease. We don't have the land available to build the units on.
If someone asks you, or let me ask you this, what else would you like to say about Farmington, or that you remember that maybe I haven't thought to ask about?
Farmington, like I said earlier, was just such a very unique place. It was an honor to be able to be raised here. I was very lucky. I was very fortunate. As far as saying anything that is, just a catastrophic deal that just was the thing that made Farmington great, I can't give you one thing. There's a lot of things, and I think a lot of it comes back to the people. You've got a lot of established families that's been here for decades and decades, and the good core, solid, ethically sound, religious, good business-minded people that has guided the growth that we've had in the right direction. We've had some really, really good leadership, and it's just a good little small town, which we're losing it. We're not the small town that we were anymore. We've got businesses that are coming in every day now, and you see the developments, and I've done several around here. So I would imagine I've probably done 300 plus lots, in developments around somewhere in that neighborhood. And, and there's more going. There's a works right now that I know there's probably 450 homes coming in. So it'll continue to grow as we go forward because of the proximity to Fayetteville and where it's at. But again, Farmington was in my day, in its prime for me, was one of the days that you could walk down beside the street and not have any worries. Leave your doors unlocked, not have any worries. Crime was non-existent. You'd get a speeding ticket, and you go up and pay your fine, and they'd make sure it wasn't on your record. They'd scold you a little bit, but it wasn't it was just a good place to live. Randy Lynch was a big influence for me. Great teacher, great administrator, great role model. I'd skipped school one day and went to watch the Razorbacks play, or at practice, and had my Volkswagen. Well, I'm coming down Razorback Road, and I run out of gas. And so I'm hoofing it down to Elsie's, down at the end of the road, and here comes Lynch up Razorback Road looking for me. And he pulled up there, and he called me Toots. He said, "Toots," he goes, "what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I come to watch the Razorbacks play, and I run out of gas." So get in. He took me down to Elsie's, and I got some gas and went back. I'm dreading all the way back because I know I'm going to get it when I get back, and I just know I'm going to get busted the next day. And so the next day, nothing said. And I thought, well, okay. So the next day, nothing said. Okay, I'm still worried, and this thing went on for a week, then it went on 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And so later on that year, I asked him, I said, why did you not, why did I not get licks over doing that? And he said, I knew the worrying was going to be a lot worse on you than what the licks would be. But that was the way that it was governed. Another, here's a cool story that, it's just different, the kind of kids we had. When I was in the 7th grade, there was a guy, great friend of mine, Tim Thomas, that we ended up being captains my senior year, and we just really good friends. But he came to school with the longest blonde hair of any you ever seen, and the girls loved him. And of course, we're all just redneck, short-haired kids, and we called him Whoopie because he'd whoop his head with that long hair. And so this is a true story. And 3 or 4 of us decided it needed to be taken care of. So we took him down at lunch, took a pair of scissors, and we cut his hair. We bobbed his hair. We butchered his hair. We had chunks cut to the scalp. We had hair sticking up. So he goes home that day, and the next morning his mom is at the superintendent's office, and they're in there, and she is on fire. And they have us lined up against the wall, and we're all looking at our shoes because you never make eye contact if you're in trouble, never. And we're all looking down, and she's pointing our fingers at us and threatening us, and Ledbetter was threatening us, and we'd better not ever do anything like that again. And we're all looking down, and they asked us if we had anything to say, and we said, "No, sir," and told us to leave. And but after that, Tim became great friends with all of us. But it's just crazy to think that started from taking him down in the courtyard and cutting his hair one day, and that's a true story.
If you had to tell somebody who'd never been to Farmington about your hometown, what it was like, what would you tell them?
I keep saying that it was Farmington, to be raised up in Farmington, it was a blessing. It was a gift, I believe. I believe in destiny. I believe everybody has a time, and I believe things happen for a reason. But growing up in Farmington was an experience like I don't see a lot of kids getting that these days. I mean, there was a lot of love. The parents was a lot of support. The teachers, Not that they don't now, but just the sheer volume of kids they have now compared to what we had is not even close. I think about being raised in Farmington, and I guess the probably the number one word that comes to me is grateful. I'm just grateful that I was raised here. I was grateful that my parents lived where they lived, or where I was in the Farmington School District, where I got to have some of the best teachers in the world that instilled, great values in me that, quite honestly, I kept all through my life. I mean, I really believe that. I mean, we were raised, we knew right from wrong. You didn't do wrong, and that was a lot of that came back to the community you lived in, the teachers you had, and the life that we lived. I mean, Mayberry RFD. I mean, that's basically about what it was like.
If you had to complete this sentence, this is sort of what we've been talking about, but how would you say it? My favorite thing about Farmington is.
My favorite thing about Farmington is probably the closeness of the friendships, the people that I've gotten to be so close with over the years, even from high school all the way through. There's a lot of things that I love about Farmington, but for me, it's home. It always was home. It always will be home. I'll be buried here. I mean, I'm born, raised, and will be buried right here in Farmington. But grateful is the word that just keeps coming back, and grateful and thankful, and that things turned out like they turned out, and I think a lot of it. And I told Coach Holland that, and when we had a reunion there with him one time, that he has touched so many kids' lives that he would never say anything about that, but he was a huge influence on my life. Second place is the first loser. I mean, that's just nobody remembers who the runner-up was. And a lot of that carried over in life, and I've been really aggressive, and I've done really well with that mindset of carrying that forward. So grateful would be probably the one word that I'm so very thankful that I was be able to raise and know the families and know the people that guided me in the direction that I was guided in, and I got good, solid, sound advice, and very grateful.